of TV a week, compared to the baby boomers at the same age watch 22 hours of TV a week. So TV viewing is going down with this generation. Where they're getting their information, where they're getting their entertainment is off the computer, off the internet. And so to use that example, Billy Graham saw that TV was the coming way to communicate, the movies and film. Today, it is internet. Yeah. And if we're going to be people who look to the future, how do we reach this next generation for Christ, it's going to be driven by the internet and social networking and things like that that are internet driven.
Let me try a couple of words on for size, and I want you to put this in the context of a local church. Multi-generational, intergenerational.
To me, intergenerational says that the generations are together, face-to-face, working together, probably a worship service where they're all present in the same worship service. Multi-generational would say to me that you could have a church where the church would have many generations in it, but you might have an 8 o'clock worship service that would be for people over 65. You might have a 9:30 service that would be for baby boomers, and maybe a 10:45 service for Gen Xers and Gen Yers. So that it is a church that is full of a multi-generational peoples, but they meet at different times. Now there's always going to be overlap, because there's always older people who say, I like to be with the young people, they keep me young. And then there's always young people who say, I like to be with the old people because I didn't have parents, or I miss my parents and I want to be around older people, or I want my children to be around older people or something. But we have a lot of larger churches that segment people by worship service. And so to me, that would be more of a multi-gen church. But even a smaller church that would have 2 services could possibly be multi-gen, but not as much intergenerational. Now, I think we have to intentionally, I think the Bible does, express the idea that the generations are mixed, and teaching and learning going on between the generations, and mentoring going on. So I think in a larger church, from my perspective, it's okay to target generations in different worship services, but I think then outside those worship services, through classes and small groups, we have to intentionally bring together the generations. And certainly on teams, worship teams, outreach teams, ministry teams. I think we would want to intentionally make sure that we staff those with different generations.
Whatever model we use, there has to be a place of blending.
There has to be a place of blending, right. I think to be biblical.
Gary, as we've talked around this table and we've spent some time together in the hours leading up to this scheduled moment, I think that what I have heard you say again and again and again is that an effective multi-generational church or ministry is not a particular program, but it is changing the culture of the church. It's the several little things that all add up.
Yes.
It's not just one moment.
Right. It's not a program.
Do we have a Sunday dedicated to multi-generations? We're going to tip our hat to that. No.
Right.
It's changing the culture of the church in all of the things we do.
Right. To value all the generations.
And who holds the key to that?
The leaders, the pastor, the board members. They have to set the example.
So it's my job, isn't it?
Yeah. It's my job too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you want to see happen 5 years from now in where you attend church and where your family attends?
We actually have just recently, 4 years ago, gone through a pastoral change. Our founding pastor is some 38 years, retired, and the church was basically turned over to a younger man who was about 35 years old. And I'm happy to say that the older people have blessed him rather than resist him. They have allowed him to make changes in the music, in the ministry style. He has moved the evangelism from being more of a pulpit evangelism to being more of a social justice type of approach, which is something we haven't talked about today, but this younger generation feels very much so that we have to be involved socially in our community, whether it's dealing with the environment or helping people who have AIDS or alcoholics or feeding the hungry, housing the homeless, whatever. And so in my particular church, the young pastor has moved the church in a major direction of helping the homeless. And the older people have blessed that. They've allowed him to make those changes, and they've not caused him grief. You know, they have said to him, "This is okay." Our attendance has doubled in the 4 years. It's an entirely different generation that he's reaching. Now, I will say that it's a larger church, and he's also kept a worship service that has been in the style that the older generation wants. And so in that way, he's blessed them in saying, you know, I understand this is the way you grew up, this is the way you like to worship, and I'm going to, you know, provide that. But then they've blessed him in allowing him to provide some different ministries that reach the younger generation. Unfortunately, not all those transitions, as you know, are quite that good. But you know, it takes wisdom on both sides. Sure. It takes wisdom from the older people to realize we have to support this young man. We were young once, maybe we were brash once too. So let's be patient and let's bless him and provide the wisdom, but don't say no. Don't say no. I think what the younger pastors are looking for to some extent is a permission-giving board. A board that says, you want to do it, let's do it. Yeah, as long as it's honorable to the Lord, let's do it. And
that's a wonderful expression. That's great.
Yeah. And I think the younger pastors have to realize that they have to bless that older generation too. And again, understand them and respect them. But if they work together, it can be a wonderful thing. I've seen that in our church. I think what I'd like to see in churches is I'd like to see harmony, fruitfulness in reaching that next generation so that those churches can be in existence, 50, 100 years from now if Christ doesn't come back. I'd like to see that.
That's a good response.
Amen to that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, anything left on your question list?
You have given us some very practical things to do, and I appreciate that, Gary. This has been more than just knowledge. It has been handles on how to make things work. So thank you very much for the time that you have spent with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great to be with you.
We would love to have you tour 300 churches in Illinois.
Let's do it.
Face to face.
Let's do it.
But this vehicle is a great way to multiply it out, and we thank you for the gift of time. But our prayer is exactly what you just expressed for your own home church.
Yes.
Is a wonderful sense of harmony, a great sense of partnership in the churches across families, generations, ethnicities, all of that, and a fruitfulness that God is glorified by.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Who could kick at that? I mean, who could say, I don't want my church to be fruitful?
No, I agree.
No,
I agree.
May it be.
Larry, Gary, I appreciate you inviting me. I like what you're doing. I think this is exciting, this format. I think it's a step in the direction we're talking about.
Yes.
Because it's visual. And this next generation, they're image conscious, they're visual conscious, and I think this is a good example of how to deliver training and communication to your pastors. So thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I believe that 78 probably has a few scratches on it.
It does. It does. I have a collection of 78s, and I actually grew up listening to, my dad was a jazz piano player and trumpet player, and he had a whole collection of jazz records, and I still have them as one of my cherished possessions today.
Thank you.
Thank you. God
Appreciate
bless you
it
all.
much.
Thank you, Gary.